Hey, I'm Doug,
And I'm Jennifer.
and welcome to the Krewe of Japan podcast, a weekly podcast where we take you on audio journeys through Japanese culture. Welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into what many people may consider the largest barrier to accessing Japanese culture, and that's the Japanese language.
But don't be afraid, in this episode, we'll cover some of the basic points about the language and how you can begin learning it today.
Or, maybe you already started learning Japanese. Even better. This episode will give you some new insights and tips in taking your Japanese skills to the next level.
Later in this episode, we will even talk to a local university Japanese professor who will share her tips on becoming proficient in Japanese.
By the end of this episode, hopefully, you'll have a little bit better understanding of what the Japanese language has to offer, the different approaches that you could take to learning Japanese, and if you stick around to the end, you might have some tips to improve your Japanese and take it to the next level. All right, so let's jump on in. So the first thing that we're going to talk about are just some of the basics of Japanese language. And when I talk about basics, I'm talking about the sounds. I'm going to use terminology that is more applied towards our English-speaking language or other Romantic languages. For example, consonants and vowels. In Japanese, there is a base 5 sounds, and they're vowel sounds, or what we would equate to vowel sounds. If you wrote it out in Roman letters, it would be A, E, I, O, U. But in Japanese, it's A, I, U, E, O. Those are your 5 base sounds. Now, on top of that, you expand the language out by adding a consonant to the front end of each one of those vowel sounds. So if we added a K, or what would be the equivalent of a K, you would get kakikuke ko, or a T. Actually, T may not be a good one to start with. M. Yeah, right. The M might be, something that we can go with. Mami mume mo. Now there is some deviation, like I mentioned with T. T, you'll have your tachi tsu te to, and your S's will have a sashi su so se so.
What I like to tell people, because I have tutored basic Japanese and I kind of teach it also in the program that we have for Japan Society of New Orleans, the Nihongo Renshu program. And what I love to tell beginners, because a lot of people, especially like in Louisiana, in elementary school and high school, a lot of the times they have to take Spanish as their second language. And what I love to tell beginners of Japanese is you already have a heads up in the game. Because if you know the Spanish vowel sounds, you already know Japanese vowel sounds. A, I, U, E, O.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yep. So if you're a Spanish learner, you already know Japanese vowel sounds.
Yeah, and the great thing is that in Japanese, the sound is the sound. It's not, you don't have short or long vowels. You don't have your weird like exceptions to the rules, like, oh, you read this as this. Now there are ways to modify some of these characters or these sounds, and specifically in the written. You can notice it in the written form, but like you can add what they call a 10-10 to the back end of ka, and it turns into ga.
Yeah.
And they could do that for a few different sounds. So there are some changes, but again, what you see on paper, you don't have to think about how to pronounce it. It's there. You know how to read it. You know how to say it. The sound is ingrained or set in stone. There's no exceptions to the rules, like I before E except after C. There's nothing like that really here. So yeah, it makes it much easier, in my opinion, when once you learn these sounds, you know how they're pronounced. And that, I think that's one unique thing about Japanese language that has an edge over English in that regard.
It does, so much so to where I don't know if you had this problem when you started learning Japanese, Doug, but I remember I have this problem still today sometimes, is when I'm sometimes reading English words, I ignore some like English rules when I'm reading, and I start sounding out words like they're Japanese, but they're not. They're English words. So I don't know why I do that.
I don't know if I've actually done that.
I don't know
um,
why. Like my mind starts thinking Japanese. I'm like, stop it. Their name isn't Japanese. It's in English, so I need to say it in a certain other way. It's just so weird. I don't know.
well, that's funny you bring that up because that I'm gonna kind of roll this into our the writing system portion of our segment. There's three writing systems. There's the base one that is hiragana. There's then katakana, and then there's kanji, which are the Chinese characters that are borrowed from the Chinese language. So what we'll start with is hiragana. This is the base form of written Japanese. This is what kids learn in elementary school in Japan at a very young age. This is what I learned first in Japanese class. Yeah, and you also hear a language called Romaji, which is really just the Roman characters, basically Japanese words written out in Roman characters. So for ka, you would see ka. Those are like I guess three, technically four writing systems for Japanese. With that hiragana again is the base one. That's the one that kids learn first. Then katakana comes after that. Hiragana is used a lot of times for words that don't have characters, like Chinese characters or kanji. They're also used as kind of a, I don't know the official name for it, but when if a word has a kanji in it, and then there's remaining sounds that happen after the kanji ends, then they use the hiragana to finish out the word.
Ah, yes.
Um,
Yeah. Or for furigana, when,
yeah,
in children's books, they'll have a kanji, but for children who may not know that kanji, they'll have like little tiny hiragana at the top, and that's called furigana. So
yeah.
yeah, it's really important to know your hiragana.
Yeah, that's the language. If anyone's trying to learn Japanese first, that definitely hiragana would be the one I would start with. Katakana, on the other hand, is
Is
which is
annoying.
yeah, it's
I hate katakana.
yeah, it's and I'll get to why it tricks me up a little bit. Reading and writing, it's not a big deal, but
Yeah,
when
yeah,
I'm
no.
reading out loud, it trips me up.
Yeah.
Um,
You sound like a I don't know, you sound just so stupid because 'cause you're, like, struggling and you're like, "Why am I struggling?" And then when you finally figure it out, you're like, "Oh, why did I struggle?"
the reason you struggle is because katakana is used primarily for borrowed or loan words in Japanese. So, for example, um, basketball in English, in Japanese, basketball, and it's written out in the instead of hiragana, it's written out in katakana. So anytime and this is not just me, I know a lot of people that have to do the same thing. When I see katakana written on a page and I try to read it out loud, my mind automatically clicks over and says, "Oh, this must be a foreign word or a borrowed word."
Definitely.
And then I try to sound it out, and what is it in my mind? But it may not be. It may just be what another reason they use katakana is accenting words or to give
Mm,
emphasis to something, kind of like in italics
yeah.
or a bold. Um, or they use it for onomatopoeias, like sounds.
Yes.
Um,
Like doki
for
doki.
example, like yeah, doki doki for like when you're nervous, or peko peko when you're hungry.
Yeah.
Um, things like that. So it's really katakana is it trips me up a little bit because I always try to sound it out as if it's a foreign word that's being translated into Japanese or applied in Japanese when it's not always the case. And you have the same issue?
But when it is the case, I do have an issue with it because, like, my husband will try and be cute and be like, "Oh, read this for me," and, like, I'm like, "Oh, no, there's katakana," and then, like, I try to sound it out, I'm like, "What is it?" And, like, I keep on saying it in my head until it clicks. I'm like, "Oh, that's the
Yeah.
word." Like, it takes me a while to plug in, like, the puzzle pieces and be like, "Oh, okay, they're saying this English word," but yeah, it's just so weird.
Yeah, it's really it's not a difficult language because
No,
again,
it's not.
hiragana is 46 characters.
Yeah.
Katakana is 46 characters. So in total, you have, oh man, I'm doing spot math here, 92 characters that you have to worry about to learn the two base languages,
Yeah.
or the written languages.
Yeah, those are
So
the bases because, like, I remember taking Japanese back in college, and the professor that I had, she made us learn hiragana first, and it only took us about a week to learn it. And then she made us learn katakana next, and that only took a week as well. Now those were like intensive weeks, but it pretty much it doesn't take long at all. It's just repetitive practice, honestly.
Yeah. I would sit down and make flashcards, and then in between classes in college, when I took Japanese as my first real exposure. I did some self study or tried, but I would take flashcards, cut them in half, write ka on the front, and on the back I'd write ka in like romaji, and then or like ta whatever, and then just kind of just go through and test myself. Anytime I had downtime, I grilled myself on those things. Same with vocabulary too, but
Yeah.
more so with the characters because I feel like once you learn the characters, you're set. Like you know those in your mind, and you can operate in the language, and it makes, in my opinion, it makes it easier. I hate reading romaji. I actually prefer hiragana or katakana to romaji any day of the week.
That's good, yeah, because a lot of people get into that bad habit of reading romanji, and it's like that's kind of like your crutch. You want to throw the crutch
Yeah,
away.
yeah. Now kanji, on the other hand, kanji is a different beast, and we'll touch on this in our interview with Sayako-san in a little bit. But kanji is, there's a lot of characters. In fact, there are in what they call the joyo kanji. That's like the daily normal use kanji. Um, there's 2,136 kanji that are in daily use or daily syndication. Like any of these could be published in a newspaper, or you learn these in schools. In fact, of those characters, 1,000 and I think like 6 or 26. I can't remember the exact number, but it's just over 1,000. Kids in elementary school should know those by the end of sixth grade. So they should already have half of those Joyo kanji in their back pocket by before they even go to junior high. And then by the end of high school, they should know the remaining 1,000 or so kanji that are out there. It's wild.
What a shame, because I only know like 125 kanji, but yet again, I haven't been like super like focused in studying on kanji. It just kind of happened, and I was like, oh, let me just try, and I did. So I don't know.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's actually an additional set of kanji that is specific for names, or an improved list of kanji that can be used in names. So when you they have like what they call a family register in Japan, and when a child is born or if you get married, or basically anytime you take a name, you have to register in like your family register. So the kanji that you use in your name has to be from a approved list of kanji. And a lot of them are there's a lot of them approved. I want to say that the approved list is over 800 characters. So on top of that 2,136, you have the other 800 characters that are approved. And it's actually, I found the number, it's 863. So there's a lot of characters that are in use, and you may not know or use these characters for like writing on newspapers or name, but they're names. So you have to be able to, you see a name and then you say, okay, how can I pronounce this? And actually, when I was teaching on JET, I had teachers that struggled with their students' names because sometimes the parents may have used an obscure kanji to 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 represent that part of their name. So I always thought that was pretty interesting aspect of Japanese, because you may be pronounced like Keitaro, but what is the K sound? I mean, that's probably not a good example, but there may be multiple ways of spelling out that name.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so it's pretty interesting.
that is. It is.
So kanji can be kind of tricky, but again, it's one of those things that there's different methods to studying kanji, and we actually might highlight some of those in future episodes. We're talking about that offline, but today we're going to keep it a little high level. So next, what we're going to talk about is going to be our individual journeys, and we're going to keep this kind of brief because we want to get to the interview. But we would like to, talk about our own individual journeys into studying Japanese. So Jen, why don't you lead off and kind of tell us about how you started, maybe some of the methods you took or some of the resources you
Yeah,
used,
definitely.
and how long you've been studying for.
Oh God. So, let's see. Oh boy. Okay, so in our first episode for this podcast, we discussed like how we got into Japanese culture, and like a lot of other people, I did start off with manga and anime, and that's kind of like my reasoning for learning Japanese because I was like, wow, this cool stuff came from Japan. What's Japan? Like, what do they do over there? And so I discovered, they speak Japanese. And I was like, well, that's cool. I want to learn Japanese. So I remember it was in high school, my first experience studying Japanese on my own. I printed out, this is going to sound so stupid. I printed out something on the internet. I don't know how I found it. It was like the most common Japanese words used in Inuyasha episodes. I know it sounds so stupid, and I still have it. I still have the sheets and everything.
Is it framed?
But yeah, no, 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 not framed. But, I had, like, highlights and I wrote notes on it. I guess I mean, I know I am. I'm such a huge fan of Inuyasha that I guess in high school I was like, "I wanna learn, like, Japanese from Inuyasha episodes." So I had, like, all these list of words, and I've never, like, really dove deep into Japanese until I got to college. That's when I took my first Japanese class. I decided, if I was gonna take a foreign language during college, it was gonna be Japanese because I was just so sick of learning Spanish after elementary school and high school. I was like, I'm done. It's so weird and interesting too because in my first Japanese class, we had about 42 people in the class, which is a lot. A lot of people were there for the same reason I was at first, because they like anime and they want to, learn Japanese, which is fine and dandy. But then you realize who's serious about the language and who's not serious about the language. Because when I went from 1001 to 1002, which is the second beginner class of Japanese language, the class got cut in half. Only like 22, 24 people stayed in the class.
Yeah, that sounds
So
about right. Mine was like that too.
that's so crazy how that happens. Like, why does that happen? That's so weird. I don't know. It's weird to me because I'm like, you love, this concept of Japan and this thing about Japan so much, why give up so easily? I mean, I guess because if it's too hard for you, sure, fine. You're being graded for it, so yeah, get out the class. But I don't know. I was just like, man, what happened to all these people? But the people who did stay, we were very keen on learning it. And, beginner class, the first beginner class and second beginner class were great. I loved it. It was easy enough for me. I think I got like B's in the class. But once I hit the third level class, which is 2001, it's the first intermediate class. That's when I felt the jump of difficulty. It went really, really difficult for me. And I was like, this is kind of hard. I don't know if I finished off with a B. I think it could have been a C. I felt like I didn't really learn too much in that class.
Yeah.
So when I was finally done all the credits that I needed for Japanese for my degree, I was like, okay, let's just start studying self study. I mostly used the rest of the textbook that we were using, which was Genki. A lot of colleges use that. And then I also used quite a few phone apps. Two of them that I want to point out because I just love them so much. One of them is called Obenkyo, which means study. And it's so great. It helps you practice like kind of flashcardish way, which I'm a
Okay.
flashcard learner, and it helps you study like the hiragana, katakana, kanji, vocabulary, sentence structure. It helps you learn everything. It's so great. And then another one that I discovered is Lingo Deer, and that one is amazing. It was meant for Asian languages, so it really knows what it's like trying to teach you, unlike some other phone apps that kind of are really out there for every language. So those 2 apps were really, really helpful.
I've never heard of them
And then
before, so I'll have to look
oh,
into
yeah,
that.
you need to, they're so great. I love just, like, when I'm, like, waiting for, like, dinner to arrive or something like that, I, like, go on my phone in the restaurant and just practice. Another thing I like to do, and, we'll talk about this in a later episode, I collect manga, but I also collect Japanese manga. And what I like to do is kind of just read through the Japanese manga. Even though, I don't understand probably half of the words that I'm reading, just the practice of reading helps a lot. So that's what I like to do. That's kind of how I study Japanese.
Yeah, and that sounds very really kind of parallels to what how I approached it. I again grew up learning or getting interested into Japanese culture with anime and manga too. But really, I took the opportunity. I think when I went to Epcot another time, not the first time I went, but like a second time, I grabbed a book that was called Easy Japanese, which was very far from easy, especially when I was doing self study. So I started out there, tried doing some study, but really couldn't get past like the first or second chapter. So I put it down, and then as I approached college, I really kind of made my decision on where I wanted to go based off of whether or not they offered Japanese, because I did want Japanese to be part of my curriculum, whether it was a major or a minor. So the availability of a Japanese course, language course specifically, was really what I was looking for. Again, took ended up going to Loyola and took 2 years of Japanese there. And like you said, my class it whittled down from the pretty large, sizable amount of people in our first semester. Second semester, maybe about a third fell off, and then year two, it dropped down even more, probably to half of what we had in our first semester. And then the end of the second semester of the second year was about the same. At that point, I think anyone who was in there had kind of was stuck in it for the long term. Um, After that, I ended up going. That's when I did my study abroad year the next year in Tokyo, and I will tell you, like Japanese immersion, if you can do it, if you could find a way, whether it's on Jet, whether it's studied abroad, if one of our if you're a listener and you are in college and considering study abroad, I highly recommend it. If you can find a way over there, because immersion language learning is so much better than classroom learning, and it's not better in that it's you apply a lot of what you learn in your classroom learning in the real world, but you really don't know what you know until you have to get out there and use it on a daily basis.
100%. Just because, like, I remember every time I would go to Japan, even after my study abroad experience, I would take every opportunity I could to just practice my Japanese because I was like, I can only do it here
Yeah.
because no one at home knows Japanese. So, yeah, I totally agree with that, Doug.
Yeah, and after coming back from study abroad and the JET program, where again I got a lot of immersion there, using it every day. Coming back, I kind of would pick up a book, like a manga, or a textbook or something, and I get desires to study, in waves. Some days it'll last for a couple days, sometimes it'll last for a couple weeks, and then it'll fall off for a while, and then I'll come back and get interested again. So it kind of comes and goes for me. There's a lot of ebb and flow there. But I when I was in Japan, I picked up. I really like football, American football, and then in Japan they call it amefuto, American football. Um, I really like there's a series called Eye Shield 21.
Ah, yes.
Um, that was basically an adaptation or introducing Japanese, I guess, Japan to American football. And since I really like football, I wanted to learn some of the terminology in Japanese, and so that was one of the ways I kind of,
Neat.
yeah, it was kind of cool. It was a way of like kind of learning some of that phrasing, and it was something I enjoyed and kind of want to see, like, how do they think of American football. So it was really, I would grab like a graphic novel from like a book off, which is like kind of like a discount like used bookstore, and yeah, and they're usually pretty cheap, like 100 yen. So I would grab a book, and just it may take me a while, but like either on the train or sitting at home bored, I would just read a few pages, and then I would sit there. Back in the day, we didn't have. Back in the day, I didn't have a smartphone, but I didn't. We had our the flip phones, so they had also what they call denshi jisho, which is like your electronic dictionary, basically like a square, like basically a smartphone dictionary, in this other device that you would carry around. And it was, at the time when I did study abroad, it was like an essential item. Like I brought it everywhere I went with me in case I needed to look up a word and I didn't have access to the internet or on my phone, because again the phones were at the time very limited to what
They
you can
were.
access. So denshi jisho was kind of like my lifeline in order to convey what I needed to convey. So it was pretty unique because now, not unique in that no one else did it, but compared to now, no one really uses a Denshi Jisho. You have your Google Translator, you have like an app
Yeah,
on your
because I
phone.
remember
So
studying abroad, a
um,
lot of the Japanese students that I was trying to talk to would have their dictionaries out, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's so cool."
yeah,
But then I saw the price tag, I was like, "Ooh, no, not cool anymore."
yeah, I want to say it set me back a couple $100 to get one. Yeah, they're not cheap, especially if you want a good one. So that's pretty much my journey. But what we want to do next is to really give us an opportunity to hear from a Japanese teacher at a university level. So today we have with us Saeko Yatsuka-Jensen, who is the Japanese language program coordinator at Tulane University. She teaches all levels of Japanese at Tulane. And Saeko, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes. こんにちは、皆さん. My name is Saeko Jensen, and I was born in Japan and raised in Koshigaya in Saitama Prefecture. Saitama Prefecture is known as the most featureless prefecture in Japan. And I was graduated from Kyoritsu Women's University in Tokyo and received a Master's of Mass Communication from LSU, concentrated on advertisement. And I'm a proud mother of two bilingual children.
That's awesome. I am a proud father of one child that I'm trying to make bilingual, so I can appreciate someone who has gone through that journey and has seen success, because we definitely have some struggles. So so what what steered you towards wanting to teach Japanese at Tulane?
Teaching was not on my list of what I want to be in the future. And I was volunteering at Japan Club of New Orleans as a newsletter editor. And Professor Horiba, who was economic professor for Tulane University, we get to know each other through newsletter, and he asked me if I'm interested in teaching Japanese at Tulane. That's how I got started.
That's interesting. Usually, a lot of people are like, I have this specific, career in mind.
Yes.
But for you, it kind of just fell into your lap in like a, coincidental kind of way. That's so interesting. I mean, do you enjoy teaching Japanese? I'm sure, though, right?
I do, and I happen to be good at it. And I don't have any formal training, but actually I found my background, mass communication background, the techniques I learned in the graduate school actually applicable to teaching, like comprehensible message. I make comprehensible message to the different background, people with different background, and convey that message through visual aid. That's what mass communication do, and it works on teaching Japanese.
Yeah, I would definitely say being able to convey, if you can't convey with your words, then being able to convey through gestures or whatever, it helps with learning languages. I mean, that's kind of a, if I know when I was first studying Japanese, and my first time going to Japan, I was like a fish out of water in terms of language. I felt pretty confident because I was quote unquote book smart. I could read and write pretty well. But when it came to speaking, I had to resort to gestures and and pointing a lot, to convey the messages. So that kind of communication is really important, and it's important to kind of convey that to your students as well. Real quick, I don't think I asked. How long have you been teaching at Tulane?
I've been teaching. This is 21 years. This
Oh,
year
really?
is yes. I started when my second child was 9 months old, and luckily I witnessed how human being acquired the language, and that was my source of information too. And I kind of incorporated that to my teaching.
Yeah, kind of like your learning curve. You got to see it firsthand,
Yes.
so then you were able to take that experience and put it into a classroom.
Yes. I did that. And also, I learned many things from other teachers. My daughter's preschool teacher, I asked her how to um, give instructions to 3, 4 years old children, and she said, "Speak in positive. Do not use do not." That's what I learned from her. Like sand, stay in the sandbox instead of do not throw sand. So I adapted that way of speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something actually my son's preschool teachers, they kind of use that same mantra of, positive reinforcement as opposed to negative. Yeah, and I'm so quick in the house to go, no, don't do that,
Yeah,
instead of
no, no.
instead of doing that. But yeah, it makes so much sense because it does build that positive vibe as in a positive
Yes.
learning environment.
Also, using negative words affect your mood too.
Yeah.
So
So with that, using those positive words, it, like you said, it creates a better mood for your students and for your classroom and environment.
yes, I try to create a nice, friendly learning atmosphere because we count on each other for conversation practice and stuff and group project. And also, one of the objectives of language study is to create interpersonal skill. So my motto is language learning should be fun. So I stick with my motto.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so important because you can read text and write characters all day long, but if you can't communicate verbally or understand when someone's communicating to you, then what's the point? So what, for your materials for your lessons, how do you organize that in that to create that environment? Like, what do you do? Like, how are you organizing your daily? Like, let's just say any general lesson that maybe you have.
I try to um, divide my lesson into 3 or 4 small segments because the person retains attention span for 10 or 15 minutes at most. So usually I start with chatting with students what they did yesterday or what they eat in the morning. The small chat and try to create relaxed atmosphere, and then maybe I do some jokes and then we have grammar lesson, conversation practice, kanji, and other stuff, and that would make 50 minutes. That's our lesson time. We meet 4 times a week.
Do you feel 4 times a week is a good measure of time to spend on studying Japanese? Or do you require your students, like, encourage them to go home and study some more because just 4 days out of the week just isn't enough time?
It's not enough. So I constantly ask students to review and also read for the next lesson. But I think they don't do that.
Well, you should encourage them to do that more because I think
Yeah.
I think I agree with you. I took Japanese in college back when I was a student. Definitely just being in the classroom and sitting in, listening and participating, as much as that's very nice and good and all, but I needed to go home and kind of practice and study. Just being in class wasn't enough. I needed to, go home and kind of collect everything that I learned that day in class and really try to focus on using it and then preparing myself for the next class. Just so, I don't know, I felt like as a student and with my other peers in the classroom, I was like, man, I don't want to mess up this word or I don't want to mess up this sentence. So I need to figure it out now so I don't look stupid in class. I have a question about your sources, though. What kind of materials do you use for your class to help teach your students? Like, what kind of textbooks or workbooks or listening practices do you use?
We use Genki, Japan Times, and they have third edition, the newest edition we use, and textbook and the workbook. And I value workbook because it enhances your writing skill, handwriting skill. Handwriting is important for Japanese.
So Genki seems to be the standard for U.S. colleges, it seems, but I've seen other things being used. But Genki, I feel, is a good starting point.
Yeah, I remember when I studied at Loyola with Father Farge, and we had used Nakama. I think was our textbook, but I know Genki and Nakama are like the two big ones that a lot of people used. At least, what was that, 10 years ago, 15 years ago when I studied.
I agree, and also Japanese university in their study abroad program use Genki, so it makes sense to use Genki in the United States, and also easy to transfer to different school if we use same textbook.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Okay, yeah, that is very useful then. That way it's not like too hard of a transition if you plan to like continue your Japanese studies at a Japanese university. That's good to know.
Yeah, Tulane used to use Nakama. Nakama is a very good book, but Genki is little more casual. There are same people, and they have journey to do things like Mary and Takeshi. They meet in the chapter 1, and they gradually makes relationship between them, and chapter 12 they separate and something like that. So,
Yeah, I remember that. They had like so much drama. I remember one time one of the drama was like meet at the McDonald's
yes,
and they were like, but we met at Haagen-Dazs. It's like, what? Genki, such good times. But I actually have another question for you
nice.
because for Japan Society of New Orleans, I'm a program chair for a program that we have called Nihongo Renshu, which essentially means, Japanese practice. And it's not a formal class because I mean, this is all volunteer work that we do at Japan Society of New Orleans. So, I kind of do what I can. And what I can do is these like kind of snippet lessons and then try to form games in these lessons that I teach the participants who come to these lessons. We don't have it right now because of the global situation that we are in, and I don't feel comfortable enough to alter it to online, just because the format of this program is very, very different from a classroom setting. So I don't feel comfortable switching it over. But in the program, a lot of participants who go to these meetings are beginners of the Japanese language. So my question for you is, how should beginners of the Japanese language start learning Japanese? Like, what steps should they take? Should they use Romanji versus learning Kana from the start? Like, how should beginners really approach the Japanese language?
I say they should remember how they learned their own native language. And my answer is listening. You find a song you like, one song you like, and then listen that song repeatedly until you can sing. And once you be able to sing, you would feel good about yourself. You will feel sense of achievement. And then you build the repertoires, and you can sing at the karaoke, or you can sing at the party, or you can sing at family reunion. Your parents, your families would be impressed, and you'll have fun too. That's my 3 steps. And probably after you master that one song, you have craving to know what the song means and what each word means, and that's the time to start learning the letters. Start with hiragana. I wouldn't use romaji, but try to read it. Try to read your song that you mastered.
Yeah, I agree with the hiragana or katakana. Well, really hiragana. Learning that first over romaji. Romaji is a good fallback, but really, if you can master hiragana, then you're writing wise set. You know, you can convey everything you need to know if you can use hiragana. So I fully agree with that. I think that's definitely, if you, language, written language wise, I think learning that hiragana first, as opposed to using romaji as a crutch, is pretty important in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree because I remember like when I could start reading hiragana and like I could read like labels on food packaging. Like all my friends would be like, "Whoa, you know what that means?" And it's like, "Yeah, it's like basic hiragana. Why are you impressed? Don't be impressed. This isn't good." So yeah, I agree with the hiragana part, and I find interesting, Saiko-san, that you mentioned listening. I think that's a great start as well. And a lot of us here at Crew of Japan, we kind of have that in our heads too of like a lot of input. So I like that idea.
And Doug, early exposure is very important for your child.
Yeah, we've we in the beginning we definitely didn't use it as much as we probably should have. But we've been incorporating it more so in our daily routine, whether it's some music, like you said, music playing in the background,
But
like kids songs, or finding a couple TV shows. Like he likes like Super Sentai shows,
yay,
so we put that I found a website where I can kind of put those on TV, or like some other like Anpanman or Doraemon. So like the different shows, I he is enjoying it and he's listening. He
okay.
may not understand it, but he's listening, and he picks up on phrases and words that way, which you don't realize it until he starts just randomly, he doesn't know you're listening to him, like kind of talking to his toys, but he'll start saying words and you're like, wow, that actually worked. Wow. uh, so yeah, listening is, yeah, I'm learning that out the hard way. We should have used more earlier on, but again, it was a learning curve for us too, but definitely can vouch for listening.
Yes, my children are living proof that they had a limited exposure to Japanese language. The rest of the world speaks English, but I tried to at least 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day to do something with them in Japanese or read with them or just to let them watch the shows. That helped.
I have a question for you,
Yes.
Saiko-san. Because with studying a language, obviously there's going to be some struggles that people have when studying. And so my question is, what are common struggles that you may see in your students while you teach in your classroom? Have you seen like them overcome these difficulties to quote unquote level up?
Well, to prepare for this interview, I conducted the survey among my students today,
Oh,
and
that's nice.
and I asked them what 5 areas of language learning: listening, speaking, reading, and writing, grammar. Which one of those 5 areas do you find most difficult? What's your guess?
I mean, for me personally, I'm going to go with my gut feeling too and my struggles. Honestly, my conversation skills are just awful. So I want to say speaking is the struggle. That's my guess. Doug, what's yours?
I was gonna say the same thing. I think at first, if you're brand new to the language, maybe the characters, like learning the different alphabets and the symbols and characters that you would have to learn. But really, once you get over that, that's easy. That's
Oh yeah.
rote memorization. But speaking for me was, I can understand a lot when I hear. It took a while to get used to it, but speaking is where I would be stumbling over my own words and trying to figure out what I want to say. So I would say I'm a guess speaking.
Well, to you and to my surprise, majority said grammar.
What?
I know. I think you are in the a different generation, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so because like I don't know, like grammar, vocabulary, the alphabet, I feel like all those things are just kind of like memorization, like just cram it in your head and then try to use it when you can. Whereas speaking, like it's such a hands-on kind of thing and I find output is a huge struggle that I have personally. So that's why I chose the speaking. But that's so interesting that your students actually pointed out grammar to be a
Yes,
big problem.
it was my surprise too. I thought they were doing great.
That actually brings us to another question with COVID-19 and social distancing and lockdown mandates and whatnot all coming with the pandemic. You know, a lot of classroom environments that we've had to, you know, traditionally we're in the classroom where you're able to pair up with the person next to you and talk. We've as a culture had to go more virtual. You know, I work from home for a lot of my work now. Same thing with classes and just in general, a lot more virtual. So has this been a challenge for your classes?
Yes,
Are
big
your
time.
first of all are your classes 100%? Are they 100% virtual?
I have 100% online and 100% in person. I have two courses this semester.
Oh, okay. The one that is in person, is that a beginner level or is that like a?
No, actually, 100% online is the beginners
Oh, really?
level two. Yes, it is really challenging.
Yeah, I would say the in person one, you know, or beginner, I think I benefited the most from being in person because you can kind of again just pairing up, working together on things and really supporting each other during those foundational stages.
Yes. So creating the community is very difficult, and one of the challenging thing is that students get really passive. They look like they're watching some show, and so try to engage them into the activity is very difficult. Zoom has device like wake up rooms, so they can pair up, but still it's different from in person, working in person, looking at each other.
Do you require cameras on for your classes or okay?
Yes, yes, that's must.
Yeah, I was about to say that if you're having to do virtual, I'd almost say you have to have cameras on, especially for a language class.
Yes,
Just
yeah,
that face to face helps.
yeah, it does. It is stated in my class policy.
So from this, having to do some virtual classes and lessons, have any new ideas kind of come out of it that you may use going forward once we get back to normal, quote unquote normal, whenever that is?
Yes, yes. I have website for each course, so I upload online contents. For example, I made a 48 grammar videos and six kanji video, um, three presentation sample videos, and they are helping. But as a result, my workload is doubled up. However, I think I started this to help students and also in case of I get sick, and my course, my website works as a synchronous instruction website. So I would keep doing this online content even though we go back to 100% face-to-face teaching. And also I created online discussion called the J Talk, and we have 4 or 5 topics. It's very simple topics like Japanese food or train station or kinship terms. So I create those discussion board and give them few credits on participation. They enjoy it. So I would keep doing it.
Yeah, and I think the online material too, it's a good resource for them, but also for you because, like you said, maybe the workload up until this point has been challenging because you've had to create everything to get to this
Yes.
point. But now that you have it, it's with language. It's not like it's aging. It's not something that needs to be constantly updated with every each passing day with
I'll
news.
be aging too though.
Oh, I've done enough.
I would look different.
That's true. Oh, they're video recording. I thought there was just audio. Okay, yeah.
It's a video.
Okay, but that's great. I think that's really helpful, and in this environment, I think a lot of students interact online anyway, in those Discord chats and message boards and things like that, where having those materials in a different platform allows them to learn maybe in a way they're more comfortable. So that's pretty awesome.
Thanks.
with the whole learning online thing, my worry, if I was a student personally, and I'm, counting my blessings that, I was able to take classes physically in front of a teacher, just cuz I'm a learner to where like I need some kind of support to learn, I feel. I'm not too fascinated with self-study. I'm not that disciplined enough, I feel. And one of the things that, like we discussed, having trouble with is difficulty in speaking Japanese. And I feel like there are a lot of people who want to use everything that they've learned in a classroom to start conversations, but they still have trouble getting the words out. And I'm guilty of that, definitely. I always want to practice speaking my Japanese that I do know, but once like I have the courage enough to, go for it, I feel like my brain just shuts off and everything that I've learned I totally forget, and it's a chaotic mess. And so, what I want to ask is, what advice do you have for people who are finding it difficult to, have conversations in Japanese?
Um, this is what I did when I was learning English, especially once I came to the United States. The pace of speaking and also the timing of speaking is different from Japanese. So I practiced um, soliloquy or the monologue at home, and I tried to vocalize everything I thought in my mind in English. And I think you can do that in Japanese, and that would shorten your reaction time, and also you will be less hesitant to vocalize your mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Kind of like just almost like you're reading to yourself, but you're
Yes,
not reading. You're just having the conversation. You're talking to yourself. That's pretty much what I'm getting at.
yes.
I actually do that to keep myself sharp. Or especially if I'm about to like talk to my wife about something and I'm like, wait, let me think about what I want to say, make sure it makes sense. Cause I'll like, I still rehearse lines in my head before actually talking. I have gotten, as I've progressed with language, it's gotten more natural, but still there's times when if it's something I really want to say in it, or it's really important, I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to fumble over it. I go through it in my head, and then sometimes I'll like kind of like whisper it under my breath to myself to make sure that
Yeah, you need to actually vocalize it.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So yeah, that was, I mean, that's definitely, I think, something that I struggled with coming out of college, especially when I went on to study abroad. I studied 2 years at Loyola, went abroad and thought I had a pretty good grasp on Japanese, from just 2 years of language study, but we didn't really practice that listening and speaking too much. Um, so when I got off the plane and got through immigration and customs at Narita for the first time, I walked out and then I I went to get my bags, and then dropped them off to like the baggage delivery place. And the guy talked to me, and I just was like a deer in headlights, frozen. I didn't know what he was saying, didn't know what he was saying, how to respond. And I was like, it was really a gut check moment for me. And I was like, oh, you don't know anything. You really need to like start, listening and practicing more. So that's yeah, that was my like kind of first time really finding out that speaking and listening is much more than just reading in a book and kind of thinking in your mind. But back to the topic of writing. We talked about hiragana a little earlier, but what about kanji? I know kanji's kind of a complex topic in terms of just how to study it, how to read it. There's different readings or different meanings depending on the context or the combinations of words. Um, so is that something that you know, with obviously with your entry level classes, you don't really cover kanji too much probably in that first year. Maybe simple ones like numbers and like watashi and things like that. But is that something that your students find challenging once you start to introduce those?
Some does, but This semester they learn 90 kanji, the second level of Japanese class. My opinion on learning kanji is fun and interesting. So if you like drawing or building Lego or jigsaw puzzle, knitting, math, or cooking or playing chess, chemistry, you should like kanji. Do you like any of those activities, Jennifer?
I love drawing. I used to draw all the time. I used to be a fine arts major in college before I switched majors my senior year. So, yes, I love drawing.
Don't you love kanji?
I do to a certain extent. I know about 125, I think, kanji. I used to know more, but I forgot a few. Um, but I don't know. It just gets to be a lot, especially when, you're considering stroke order. What is your opinion on stroke order? Like, is it a necessity? Does it need to be done?
Yes, stroke. Yes, stroke order is important to retain the shape of kanji.
Hmm.
But kanji is interesting because mostly they are made out of pictures. They are pictographs, and each radical has meaning. For example, there is a radical represents person, and there is radical represents tree, and combined person and tree is resting. So the person is by the tree resting. Or there is a radical represents plants and also transformation. Combination of two meaning is flower. So if you know those radicals and it's a combination, like just like building Lego or drawing or knitting, jigsaw puzzling. So you should break a little bit of your preconception that kanji is difficult. But if you break into small pieces and start learning those meanings, probably you will find kanji interesting.
I love that you put that into words because that was just so beautiful, combining the two and then it forms like a new image. Especially when you use the example for rest, the kanji for rest, which it's a person, particle for person and tree. I did find that true. And actually I found that to be true for myself when I was studying kanji. I would use those pictures and use those kind of ways of remembering just so I could remember because I found that, like you said, they're kind of like pictures. They do look like pictures. And so, yeah, I definitely do agree with that. That studying kanji can be difficult, but it can also be fun to learn because, especially if you put it in that sense of, do you like drawing, Legos, cooking, anything where you're, putting things together and forming something new. And I'm kind of grateful that Japanese is like that, that it is such a beautiful language where it does combine and kind of form a new life, a new word in a sense.
Also, practicing kanji is therapeutic.
Yeah, I agree because like I would just kind of doodle in my notebook when I would be in classes, other classes, not Japanese class. I would be not listening to my professor, and I'd be just practicing kanji on the top of my page or something like that. It's similar to how like some people find like those adult coloring books like therapeutic, and just kind of that back and forth of just following an order and just doing it, and eventually progressing your skill. Um, yeah, I personally, I think it's difficult remembering some of the readings, but I actually really like kanji. I think it makes learning and reading Japanese a lot easier because you may have the same word that's said the same way 5 different times or 5 different ways. It has 5 different meanings. But if you have the kanji there, you know exactly what it is. And I find that much easier to read than if it's just everything was hiragana.
Yeah, definitely. Because I find that for kanji, I can see a kanji character and know the English, but if you ask me to like say it in Japanese, I wouldn't be able to because I'm so like caught up in like the pictures that's how I like kind of know the kanji. I don't know the full entire kanji as you can say because I was one of those people where I would be at work at like my desk when I was answering phones for work and I would look a little insane because I'm literally writing the same kanji over and over again on little post-it notes, just repeatedly writing and then taking the note and doing another one and doing another page and constantly doing it until I memorized it. So, and then like every day I would go back to that notepad, new sheet of paper, and I would just go at it and try to write as many kanji as I could remember, and just to kind of like test myself to see, okay, I wrote these kanjis multiple times. Let's see if I really know how to write them, or if I can really remember them. So yeah, I kind of make it a game in a sense. But yeah, I really do enjoy studying kanji when I put the time and effort into it.
Yes.
But we've been talking a lot about, beginners of the Japanese language. And I actually have a question, as an intermediate learner myself, because I do find like beginner material is a little too easy for myself. I feel like I am at an intermediate level of Japanese. And so there's a lot of intermediate learners of Japanese out there who are finding it difficult to reach that advanced level, including myself. And, it's almost like I use this in some of my presentations when I do talk about like learning Japanese. It's like, it feels like a wall. That there's a wall in your language learning that you just can't get over. You can't climb over it. You keep slipping and falling. And this wall is literally only in between intermediate level and advanced level. That's what I find. So my question for you, Saeko-san, is, what do you think is the best way for learners to transition from intermediate to advanced Japanese learning? And is there anything in particular that they should be doing or avoiding in their studies of Japanese language?
Well, one thing you can do is challenge the contest or the proficiency test. That's one thing that motivate you to conquer. And another thing you can do is you decide your repertoire of topics that you can talk deeply, you can discuss deeply. So you decide, okay, next time I see my friend, I will tell them about American politics. So you start thinking about how you start and how you explain how, and you kind of you involved in writing too, but so that just like writing speech, and you master the speech and actually use it when you meet your Japanese friend or Japanese peers. Have few topics that you can talk deeply and you are good at in speaking, and I think that would break your mental wall. The wall is just the inside of your head.
It really is. It really is. I very much think that. But I do hear from other people that like right when I say like the wall, something in their eyes like light up and they know exactly what I'm talking about. So I am glad that it's not just in my head. It's in everyone's head. A lot of people's head. So but yeah, definitely. It's a mental game that
Yeah.
yeah, I think I'm gonna try and work on what you just described, Saeko-san. I think I'm gonna try that.
And also, when you conversation stops, you ask questions. Oh, I like your shoes. Where did you buy? You can do that, right? And the conversation continues.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like that.
Conjunctions helps too. It will buy you time to think what you want to say next. So conjunctions like そして、けれども stuff like that. ところで
Yeah, some of that
down.
that filler information like eto and or like so desu ne. I someone told me that so desu ne is the most resourceful phrase in Japanese language because you can literally respond to anything with so desu ne, and then just as you're like thinking your response up, you just throw that out there, and that buys you 10 seconds to really formulate your next thought.
Yes.
So part of I think language learning, especially with this intermediate to advanced wall that we were just talking about, and even the beginner level, is overcoming some of those mistakes and being willing to make those mistakes. It's one of those best learning tools out there, by saying the wrong thing and then realizing, oh, you know what, I shouldn't have said it that way. They also make great stories for like a language learner's journey. Um, Me personally, I know I've mixed I mixed up onaka ippai, the first character in each of those words, when talking to my mother-in-law once. I didn't say onaka ippai. I said inaka oppai, which is not I'm hungry, which is not I'm hungry. And she just looked at me like, and I'm like,
Oh
oh wait, no, no, no,
no.
no, 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 no,
That's
no,
a
onaka
great
ippai.
one.
Yeah. So I mean, things like that, you just it's funny. Like you can share that with somebody and make them laugh. And I mean, I know when I was teaching in on the JET program, my some of my students would say things that were just like, "Wow, that is hilarious." It's not correct, but it's hilarious the way you said it. And I would point that out and say it's not bad that you made the mistake though. It's important because you now know, okay, don't say it that way. I need to say it this way, or different things, and it's just it makes it stick better than just reading something out of a book. So have you had any like really like one of your like most memorable mistakes that maybe a student has like said something funny in class, in Japanese that they didn't intend to say, or something maybe in writing too? Either way.
Yeah, that you're right. That mistakes is important that you can learn from it. So I usually amplify the student's mistake by saying, "Thank you for making that valuable mistakes." Um, I can think of now is the common mistakes is adjectives,
Yeah.
kawaii
Yes.
and kawaii. Kawaii, cute, and kawaii is scary and
Kind of the
frightening.
opposite, right?
You definitely don't want to tell your girlfriend kawaii because that's an insult.
Yeah, and also students often drop the elongating vowel sound, but it makes difference like oba-san and obasan. Obasan is aunt, oba-san is grandmother or old one.
Yeah.
So it makes big difference that just elongating vowel sound.
Or just kind of skipping over that, like if it's a chitsa, like a small tsu inside of a word, instead of giving it that kind of break in
Yeah.
between the two sounds, throwing those, kind of rushing through the word. Again, completely different meaning sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Shujin and shujin. Shujin is husband. Shujin is prisoner.
Almost the same thing.
Yeah, almost the same thing. I know. It's a synonym.
Yeah, that's it, it's so true, and something I not the shujin and shujin, that's, as a husband, I don't feel like I'm a prisoner,
Oh,
but I had to say that in case my wife's listening. No, I'm kidding. Um, it's important though. And it's one of the things I always kind of preach to people. You can use these mistakes in conversation. If you make them and realize you make a mistake, you can use that as an icebreaker to kind of like make things easier to talk to, because it kind of takes people off of their edge when talking and speaking with someone that doesn't speak the same language as them fluently as their first language. Having that mistake kind of like takes an edge off and makes people a little more at ease, because you show that you're vulnerable.
Yeah. Also, it's not a mistake, but my friend from Thailand pointed out that Japanese is interesting, that Japanese use onomatopoeia, so many onomatopoeia. And she said she can speak with only onomatopoeia, and she can express her feelings and what she wants. And she looks at me, said, "Peko peko." It means I'm hungry. That onomatopoeia,
That is so true.
I know, and she looked at me, peko peko, pak pak. Pak pak is the sound of eating. So I'm hungry, I want to eat. Other mistakes that students make is use honorifics to themselves. That sounds ridiculous to Japanese people.
that's
And
something I actually struggle with too.
yeah, 私のお名前は also, some of them use really muscular pronoun acquired from anime, like ore, and they end up with female
お私
speech,
は
like 俺は食べたいのよ. It's really funny to me. And another thing that I don't tell my children, but they use baby word in very proper sentence. They don't know there are different expressions, but I don't tell them because I want to hear that. It's very cute. So,
For selfish reasons.
yeah, selfish reasons. So don't tell them.
I won't. Secret safe with me. So just one more question,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna kind of wrap everything up. But before we do that, do you have any words of encouragement for learners of Japanese of any level? Maybe they're hitting that proverbial wall, whether it's speaking or listening or grammar. What is something that you would like to say to those listeners or those students of the language that are, they may be having some reluctancy to pursue additional Japanese study? They may be thinking about, what, I don't want to take Japanese next semester. It's too hard. What kind of words do you have for them?
Well, I would say stop judging. You think you're not progressing. Who the judge? And if you are thinking taking break from learning in school, you can still continue doing what you want to do, the listening or watching TV shows. So I just say don't stop and don't judge yourself. You should think in a long span. I learned from my children's eating habit that they eat one day they eat only broccoli, one day they eat only chicken, one day they eat only carrots and grapes. But if you look at in 2 weeks span, they cover whole nutrition pyramid. So for language studying, you should easy on yourself.
Yeah.
You are brave enough to choose the language that everyone thinks that most difficult. So I think you should continue what you like, the area of language learning. You don't have to be a master of every aspect. Just follow your craving.
Yeah, that's great.
I love that. I'm gonna follow that advice. I feel encouraged.
Well, it's so true. You just have, you don't have to be a master of every single thing. It's just focus on one thing for one day, and then take care of that, and then move on to something else. If you don't feel like you're progressing in that area, take a break. Nothing wrong with that. I fully agree. It's something that you can apply not only to language but everything. It's a great way to think and live. Yeah. So that's kind of everything we had for you. This was really fun. Thank you so much.
I hope I met your expectations.
Oh, exceeded.
Definitely. I had so much fun just listening to your responses. I find that your advice and your, answers were so knowledgeable and so beneficial, not only to myself, I'm sure the listeners are going to really appreciate it too. So, yeah, no, I fully enjoyed this interview.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and thank you for coming on and taking the time out of your day. I know it's really great weather outside that you're that you're missing out on, right? At the point of recording, by the way, the listeners, we're in winter Mageddon 2021.
Again, I would like to express my gratitude that you guys are doing this for promoting Japanese culture and language. So thank you. And on behalf of Japanese community in New Orleans and on behalf of 123 million Japanese people.
Aw, I'm gonna cry.
Pleasure.
So sweet.
And that's it for this week's episode. I hope you really enjoyed everything we talked about today on Krewe Japan.
In today's episode, we took you on a brief tour of the Japanese language. And finally, with the help of Saeko Sensei, we explored some tips and approaches to learning Japanese efficiently. This week, we challenged you to either start learning Japanese, whether you use some of our study tricks that we use, or if you take some advice from Saeko Sensei.
And if you have some time, feel free to share your language learning journey with us on social media. We're on Instagram and Twitter at Krewe of Japan Podcast, KREWEOFJAPAN.
While you're there, subscribe and let us know how you are enjoying the podcast. That's it for today. Until next time.